Aloha, spooky nerds, and welcome to Talking Strange, a paranormal pop culture show with the Den of Geek Network. It's available on Twitch, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And I'm available right now. I'm your host, journalist, author, researcher of weird things, Aaron Sagers, also appearing as host on the Netflix series 28 Days Haunted and on the Travel Channel and Discovery Plus series Paranormal Caught On Camera. Now, on January 20th, paranormal investigators Amy Bruni, Adam Berry, and psychic medium Chip Coffey return to Travel Channel and Discovery Plus with 10 new 1-hour episodes of Kindred Spirits. This is their 7th season. Can you believe it? 7th season. Now, these intrepid investigators help people who are tormented by the dead by settling spirit activity, capturing evidence, bringing closure to each location that they visit. And they utilize several tools to do this, to communicate with the spirits. And together, Bruni, Berry, and Coffey will discover shocking stories by visiting some of America's most haunted homes and historic sites. And during their terrifying, emotional, thrilling investigations, this paranormal team captures all sorts of interesting evidence, but also there's a real human connection there. And actually, you can't spell kindred without kind. And I would say that they put the kind in the paranormal. So get your questions ready for those of us that are joining us with our live audience, because we're bringing them in. Without further ado, psychic medium Chip Coffey, Adam Berry, and Amy Bruni.
Hi.
Hey guys, welcome.
Hello.
Happy
I
New
that
Year.
plug, Adam Berry.
Thank you very much, Warner Brothers Discovery, for the mug for Christmas. Shout out.
We got more than just a mug.
I know. But this is part of it.
A myriad of gifts. But
and it's not very appropriate that his mug is Wonder Woman. I mean, really.
Listen. It has nice tea in it, and I'm ready to talk all things paranormal.
I like it. You can spill the tea or coffee or whatever substance is. I'm actually drinking out of a Mount Washington Betty and Barney Hill mug.
Oh, so. I love that.
I, on the other hand, am boring. I have a red Solo cup.
No, a red Solo cup means there's booze in there, coffee.
There's definitely vodka. There's Bloody Mary.
Yeah, there's a Bloody Mary in that, Chip.
Apparently, Chip Coffey is heading out after this episode to go play beer pong with all the frat boys.
What he does in his spare time.
Well, it's good to see.
Girls got to do what a girl's got to do. You know, that's all I can say.
I mean, we can all agree it's not reality TV that's paying the bills. So,
yeah, you really know, Chip.
I'm so happy to see each of you, and I guess it's even though 12 days in, Happy New Year to all of you. I think I'll say it one final time. For the 7th season of Kindred Spirits. Before we get into the premiere episode, and I do want to talk about that premiere, I kind of want to get a sense from each of you how you would view. Is there a theme to this season? How would you describe sort of the thematic overview of this season? And
I'm over. Yeah. So actually, it was weird because we were just discussing this earlier today. That this season seems very much. Sorry, my cat Harry. Real quick. There's 3 doors in this room. One of them is open. The cat is scratching at one of the closed doors. So,
and she goes.
Oh God! Yeah, she's like. Bye.
Okay. Anyway, so as I was saying, so every season of Kindred kind of organically seems to have a theme, and the theme this season was very much regret. Like it seemed like we just kept encountering spirits that were very regretful of something that happened in life. And at the end of it, I know I can't speak for Adam, but I know we talked about this. Like we really started examining the way that we live our lives and like how we don't want to have any regrets, when that time comes. So it's really interesting how that kind of happened.
Mm-hmm. So anyone, Adam, Chip, do you want to weigh in on that?
I mean, yeah, I think, it's one of those moments, especially in that there's a specific case, I think it's toward the end of the season that happens where this individual, this lady, speaks to us candidly and very openly about her current situation in the afterlife. And it does make you pause for a bit and kind of just think about like, well, what do I want to do today? Like, am I going to not eat that donut? Yeah, I'm going to eat that donut. Okay. Because life is too short. And, this season has been very difficult in a lot of ways. Some of the cases, specifically the one in Palmyra, New York, is very brutal in terms of the history and what happened to that family in that house when it burned down. And it's hard stuff to swallow. And so I think Amy and I and Chip, we all had to like take a minute at times and think about our own mortality in a different way than we haven't on other episodes or other cases.
Mm-hmm. Chip?
I think there's always a theme that's going on. And, Amy put it very succinctly. It's about looking at who you are and where you are and what's going on in your world. And interestingly enough, there are those spirits that are out there that are still feeling like they have some unfinished business or shoulda, woulda, couldas. So that was what was really interesting to me with what happened with this season, particularly, was the whole shoulda, woulda, coulda aspect of it, and having those sort of things of saying, I really wish that I'd done this or said this or gone there or whatever. I hear that sometimes from spirits, especially those who have died young or have not fulfilled the things that they want to fulfill. They wish that things could have been different.
Mm-hmm. I want to get into this premiere, this January 20th premiere, and it's called Broken Spirits. And this is when you guys travel to the Greene County Historical Society Museum. This is a former poorhouse in Pennsylvania, and it was presented for 100 years, presented to be this safe haven for people. And we kind of know how that story goes with a lot of other locations. People set out with these grand intentions, but then there's sort of mistreatment that takes place. I guess, Amy, let me start with you. What was the initial attraction to this particular location, and how would you set up this episode that people are going to be checking out? It's a really strong premiere episode too, by the way.
Yeah, it's so funny. We were having a talk with someone earlier, and she was talking about how she's seen every episode of Kindred Spirits, and she was like, "But I think that episodes 1 and 2 of this season are the best episodes I've seen." And this one really, I think, resonated with us because anytime you have a historical location that has kind of a dark history to it, it's very relevant. Like you want to make sure that history is told. And then also for us, there's just such a great team of volunteers there really trying to preserve that history. And we really just wanted to be able to help them with what was going on there, because that haunting was very extreme. I mean, there were some pretty wild things that went on there. So I think it was just us. I think we went in like trying to be aware of what went on there before, be very respectful of what went on there before, and just try to kind of treat those spirits accordingly, but also help the team that was working there so diligently. So I was fascinated by it. The history there is crazy. It's very documented. There's actually history there we weren't even allowed to talk about on the show.
Wow.
So, but yeah, so it was a really strong first case, and it really set us off on like an amazing 10-episode run, to be honest. So,
I mean, you can talk about the history you weren't allowed to talk about on the show here.
I wish
I wish we could. I was.
They were both.
If it slips out. Well, Adam, let me ask you this. One of the characters, and it seems like with some of these investigations, some of these cases, there tends to be this sort of marquee ghost, and a lot of times that comes forward, or that the story revolves around. Mm-hmm. And in this case, it's William B. Cage, this guy in 1890s. He took over the poorhouse, over the institution, and he was known to beat inmates, and this idea of chaining people up, even this dungeon, and it's we say dungeon, and that's not really an exaggeration based on what we see in the episode. I guess my question for you, Adam, is there's this guy that's kind of, by all reports, he was a bad dude. He was not a good person. And he can easily, as a ghost and as a figure, be literally larger than life. He can dominate the proceedings. And yet there's these other potential spirits there that probably want to make themselves known, who are not necessarily the marquee ghosts. This all kind of presents a dilemma, because do you give the attention to the bad guy, or do you seek out giving voice to the lesser known people?
I don't know if we have a choice, right? So every case that we do, we don't know what we're getting into. I mean, we know kind of, but it leads us on a journey the entire time. And I don't think we have a choice in terms of who is the dominant voice in the room. And on this case, it could be Cage, right? It could be Cage. And if he were the dominant voice, then we would have a come to Jesus moment with this man and say, do you, ask if he regrets what he did, does, whatever. But on this specific episode, I think there were other voices that were much louder than him. And they had a reason to reach out. Our purpose there is, you'll see on the episode, is sort of clear at one point. It's like, oh, this is why we're supposed to be here. And I think that is very important. So I don't necessarily believe we can pick and choose who we want to talk to and not want to talk to, but we have the ability to, I guess, guide the outcome in terms of whoever it is, we can help them or not help them or try to patch it up.
Yeah. Chip, I want you to add to this, because while we may be talking about this guy, William B. Cage, for this location, it can really apply to a lot of locations, that you might have this very domineering bully presence come forward. Is it a challenge for you from the psychic medium perspective to not give in to the bully, still listen to the others that are in the room, or is that a balancing act for you?
It can be, definitely. And lots of times, if you ask that person to step aside kindly, which I usually try to do, sometimes they will acquiesce and do that for you. And if not, you just have to kind of let them know that they need to step aside and let other people talk. This guy, I'm not going to do any spoilers, but this guy was a big presence at this location. I mean, he had history, told his story. And we managed, luckily, to circumvent having to deal with solely him. We didn't have his voice be the dominant, the most prominent voice on this case. So that in itself made it kind of easier for us that he wasn't there trying to bully his way in and take over.
Yeah. Amy, from the historian and historical perspective with this, not just this case, but in general, first off, when I was seeing the setup for this story, it made me automatically think about the St. Augustine jail, because that was another institution dominated by like a big, brutal guy. And that's how we largely now think of the jail. That's the main name associated with it. But I think you could disagree with me, but I think that we kind of lack nuance in today's world. And we also think of our heroes as entirely pure when they aren't. They're flawed. And we think of our villains as entirely bad or evil, which most of the time they're likewise flawed and not necessarily evil to the core. When you're discovering someone like this guy, this villain, it's deceptively easy to give into that notion of he's just purely a bad guy. Do you have to push back on that a little bit and think, well, okay, maybe he was a human of his time. Maybe he was not all bad. Maybe he thought he was doing what was. Is that a perspective you're constantly having to think of?
I mean, we have to do that a lot, because like, whether we want to admit it or not, we're dealing with people from a completely different era, and humankind does not have the greatest track record, and I think that it's important that places like that aren't defined by those characters, but I also think it's important that we explore what they did and what happened, and put perspective historically as to what was happening there as a whole. And so it's very important that we tell those stories because we need people to understand what happened there and why, so we don't do that again, right? But at the same time, like when it comes to a character like that, you know, that gentleman doesn't, not to give away too much, but like those aren't always the people haunting the location. You know, they usually left at some point. It's the people who were subjected to that person are usually the people there. And so you have to learn about that person to get some perspective on what those folks went through. And so it's hard. It depends on the haunting and what the history is, but it's important to dig into the history and also the characters and tell that story accurately. I'm always reluctant to make someone the bad guy based on this kind of word of mouth, right? I never like to play that historical game of telephone and assume this person was awful. But this was very well documented. You know, it was one of those things where it was very easy to find, you know, what this guy did and how awful he was. So yeah, I just think it's important to kind of take all of those, all of that into account when you're dealing with a place like that.
Yeah.
What I find really interesting, if I can kick in here for a second, is that this place, this poor farm, this poor house, whatever you want to call it, institution or whatever, asylum, there were a lot of these places in our country.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of them. And many of them don't have the best history. Many of them have sordid details that are associated with them. So it really is telling of what life was like in these places. When you go back and you start to investigate these things, you have to really take into consideration that some of the people that were there were treated horribly, and life must have been pretty much misery for them. And, you know, that all of us, Amy, Adam, and myself, I may feel things from a psychic perspective more deeply than they do, and I don't know that that's an accurate description of it. But I don't think we can help but feel such sadness and upset for what those people must have lived through.
And just kind of to further that too, so a lot of these places stayed open until the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, there wasn't as much like mistreatment going on. Like there were people that actually relied on these and that's all they ever knew. Like there were, you know, people who were admitted to these places as children, and you're sitting there in the 70s and 80s and they're seniors or, you know, adults who have nowhere to go and they all suddenly closed. And most of them were put into like skilled nursing facilities and nursing homes. And it was such a different environment for them. So at one point, a lot of these places took a turn and were actually doing some good, but that funding got taken away. And these people left everything they knew to go someplace else that probably didn't have the same kind of comforts that these poorhouses eventually had. So it's really interesting. Like there's a lot of emotion behind those buildings. And like Chip was saying, there were so many of them. So, you know, a lot of them were torn down, but I do think it's super important that ghosts aside, people recognize that these places existed and what they served.
Also, just to point out, like Amy was talking about how like we don't want history to repeat itself, but what this guy was doing, people are still doing it. You know, embezzling funds, like taking the funds and using it for their own goods instead of giving it to people that need it or the funds that were allocated for that, you know, for that cause or for that individual. So people are still doing it. But he had so much control over his environment because he was in charge. You know, his world and what he controlled and the money he got, you know, was compacted into this one building.
Yeah.
And from the residents' perspective, one of the things that I felt at this location was just this sense of resignation and hopelessness. It's like, this is our lives. This is all we've got. It is what it is. And there's a real sense from me personally, a sense of such sadness that this was their life. This was how their life was at that point in time, and probably ended that way. Was that sense of just being trapped.
2 errands.
There's 2 errands.
My question for you is, talk about some of the locations this season that have been on your radar for a while that you've been trying to get to.
Oh,
Oh God, where did we even go, Aaron? Where did we even go?
I will say that. So I think it's actually the second episode is at Palmyra Museum,
Yeah.
which while we had heard of it, I don't think we realized the proximity it had to like the Fox sisters' original cabin and things. And so we got there, and all of a sudden we're in the middle of this like museum that's very heavy with spiritualism type mementos. And I mean, we were already like completely geeking out. And then she's like, "Oh, I'm also the caretaker for the Fox sisters cabin." And we're like, "Wait, what?" And so we got to go, actually, I don't think it's on the episode, but we actually like went and visited that really important piece of history as far as what we do. And so that was a very exciting episode.
You're muted again, Aaron. You just mute.
We don't need to. We'll just do it ourselves.
I think if you also, Aaron, if you turn the phone this way, doesn't it go long ways?
It will not. We are having technical glitches. StreamYard is crashing all around us. So
that's what happens when you interview a bunch of ghost people.
Yeah,
I guess
surprise, you get a ghost.
Yeah, everybody goes home with a ghost. So Chip, how about you? I mean, were there any locations that you were particularly excited to take part in? I know sometimes you're doing a remote reading, but
they don't tell me where I'm going. So I come in like blindfolded or blind or not knowing anything. So having some desire or some wish to go someplace, I might as well be peeing in the wind. It's not going to do me any good to have any desire to go anyplace because I go where these two on the screen below bring me. So I have to adapt to whatever they throw in my path.
I had to pull up the episode list because we did, it all blends together at one point. Yes. So let me go down. 70. Wait, no. What note is that? I don't even know what episode that is. The Valley Camp. The Valley Camp in Sault Ste. Marie.
That was amazing. Yeah. How did I forget we did?
I know.
We've done it so many times because we've investigated it off camera. But yeah,
that place.
Oh,
phenomenal. The fact that we got to do that, that case, and then John Tenney's on that case with us. I think John Tenney's on this episode with us, and he helped us figure out what was going on. But like the Valley Camp is definitely one that we're looking forward to for sure.
I thought the episode that we did an episode that was right outside of Buffalo, and it was the one there was a family, and you guys remember it because we went down into the basement, and that's where I said, nope, not staying down here. I'm leaving. Bye. Check, please. Mm-hmm. So it was that for me is one of the more memorable episodes that I remember from having to just, overwhelmed by what was showing up in my head and what I was kind of viewing of what had happened in that specific location. That was a very interesting place to say the least.
Well, I want to talk about episode 3 because obviously 10 episodes, there's a lot of great cases that you're dealing with, but episode 3 really struck me as a powerful one. And you're dealing with sort of these old school religious ideas and very strong Christian faith, as well as the notion of occult and even paranormal investigators and how that might impact people with faith. How was this, Amy, a different kind of case for you? Because I don't know, I thought it felt different to me.
Oh, it was definitely different. It was strange because, like you were saying, there was this kind of biblical, like very kind of religious undertone to the case. And like, it was one of those things that, I mean, it was one of those cases where it should have been very obvious. Like we went in and it was like, to us, we're like, oh yeah, we know who's haunting this place. But it was not obvious at all. There was this whole like web of genealogy that was required, and then talking to former residents of the home that had passed away, and then Heather, who came into our Heather's this lovely woman who's been helping us. She's a psychic from upstate New York. We helped them initially on their place, Greystone Manor. And she came in and like she dredged up all this stuff that we didn't even know had gone on there. And so it was a very complicated case. Sometimes those residentials can trick you because you think it's going to be easy because it's a residential. Like, how much history could there possibly be? But this was like, oh, we found this great big old Bible up in the attic, and there's all these names in it and locks of hair. And then, oh, by the way, you know, we found a dead body in our backyard once. And oh, also, you know, our dad died in the kitchen. Like, it was just nonstop. So one of my favorite cases this season, and the family was great. They were really interesting to work with and super helpful. So
it's one of those cases that it's this Pittsburgh house. The episode title is "Beware the Occult." So it's one of those episodes that
can I address that for?
We didn't name that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Yes.
And here's the thing: it's when I think of the title "Beware the Occult," I think of it someone saying it sarcastically, like "Beware the occult," not like beware the occult, right? Yeah. This episode is very much it shines a light on fears of the unknown, whether it's religious fears of the unknown, not understanding what somebody else believes and thinking your way is the highway, you know, it's either your way or the highway. So I think it's an episode that was hard to unravel for us. But it's definitely a valuable lesson for those that are watching in terms of, you know, it's okay to believe in something that might be a bit different than what you believe. And it's a very interesting case for sure.
And it's one that's early on in the episode you set up that someone has passed on, the residents of the house have tarot cards, and there's also this Bible that's been found in the house. That's all set up in the first couple seconds, or a couple of minutes. So that's not spoiling anything. But what I found interesting about this is one of those episodes that if it had come out 10 years ago in paranormal reality TV, this would have gone in a very different direction. And the result would have been, oh, the people that are dabbling in this are dabbling with dark forces and they're bad and this is bad and don't do it. And I kind of want to get your reaction as to how this stands as a piece of TV evolution, paranormal TV evolution. Amy, I want you to respond to this, but also Chip, I want to get your perspective on the faith element too.
I mean, I think that honestly, I think there's still people going down that road because I hate to say it, but it does get viewers. You know, I think that if anyone, you know, if there were a few other people, if they'd done that case, they would have gone down that road. But I think it's been important to us since day one to not automatically go down roads like that because, you know, there are, how many times do we go into a place where people are convinced there's a demon haunting their home and it's a misunderstood person acting out, you know? So we've learned our lesson many times that you have to explore everything fresh and not make any assumptions and never speak in absolutes, just go in with an open mind. And also, you know, we love dabbling in all of those things ourselves. So we know, you know, we know full well that's not affecting anything.
Chip, what's your take on it? Because, I mean, I know that you have some very strong boundaries with the directions you're willing to explore or not within the paranormal.
There are some, you know, I was raised Christian and Catholic, so I can't fully escape those sort of things when it comes to my belief system. But I'm also, as long as someone is a decent person, you know, and whatever the belief system is, and they're not hurting anyone else or themselves, or they're not trying to force their beliefs down someone's throat, I'm good with that. I say that I don't try to convince or convert anyone to my ways of thinking, but different people have different ways that they handle things. With the spiritual aspect of things or the paranormal aspect of things, I'm certainly not afraid of tarot cards. Certainly not afraid of a Ouija board. I'm certainly not afraid of a pendulum. You know, there are some things that I don't understand and I kind of try to avoid. I do have some problems with certain things or beliefs that I say I don't want to have really a whole lot to do with, but that's only my own personal preference. Do what you want to do over here, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to have to accept that or adhere to it or be involved in it. So, you know, I don't live my life in fear. And sometimes if there's things that we don't agree upon, we just don't either agree upon them and don't make it an issue.
It's I haven't seen all the episodes of this season, but I think it's a really strong episode because it's got a little bit of everything, and there's some, again, without spoiling anything, Amy does some detective work in this that even requires an on-screen graphic explaining the things that she has uncovered. It's
I had to I was trying to explain. I probably explained that a million times because it was all these same gentlemen with the same name, the lineage. It got very confusing. And we actually, part of the case, this is just a lesson to other investigators out there. We were talking to the wrong person because I got it wrong at first. And so we were able to fix it, but for a half of a night, I was like, oh, I think I got this wrong, Adam. It happens. And so
it's really honest. I mean, it's a strong episode. So I think the question I have for you is, out of this season, for each of you individually, what episode do we watch for your personal WTF moment this season? Which episode where you're like, holy crap, this one's me. This is my WTF moment. Chip.
It was the one, excuse me, it was the one that I talked about earlier. We were, it's awfully hard not to give spoilers. I guess you guys are going through the same thing with Amy and Adam. You want to talk more, you want to talk more about it, but we were at this location and we were in the basement of this location, and the image of what had happened in this basement at some point in time came into my head very shockingly and clearly. And I was just like, oh, hell no, I got to get out of here. This is just, it was overwhelming. The emotion that surrounded this and just the imagery that presented itself in my head. And that for me was my WTF moment of just let me the heck out of here. I just got to get out. I got to escape this place, which, interestingly enough, wasn't so dissimilar from what was coming from Spirit.
And I know Amy and Adam were probably just looking at their episode descriptions.
I literally was like,
I know. I just want to make sure I got the episode right.
Yeah. Even if you don't necessarily spoil it, you can allude to which episode it will be in. You've got your Waynesburg, PA. That's your first one. Palmyra, New York. Pittsburgh. The Angry Ghosts of Albion.
That's what he's talking about.
Oh, well, okay. And then Gettysburg, Providence, Raynham, Mass, and Bellefonte, PA. And then West Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
So where would we go for your WTF moment, Amy?
Well, it wasn't really like a WTF moment. It's just a very emotional moment. I cry, which we all know I don't have feelings. So this is very rare. But no, there was just this moment, it's episode 8, I believe. I think it's a shadow in the night. So it's in Pennsylvania, and it's at the most unassuming little house. Kind of looks like kind of house that would be like in, Friday the 13th or something. But
oh wow,
just had this very powerful conversation with the spirit. Adam was doing the spirit box, the Estes method, and she just said some really profound things that I can't stress enough has completely changed my outlook on life. Like that conversation, he took those headphones off and blindfold off, and I literally just started crying. And I was like, I am living my life wrong. And so if there's one episode you watch this season, make sure it's episode 8, because it's just so incredibly profound. So it was like it was a WTF moment, but it was just like a life changing, like a perspective change moment for me. And I think for Adam too, like we both were just like, oh shit.
Yeah. It's all right. You can swear all you want on this.
Okay, good.
Yay.
Adam, how about you?
I'd say the most aggressive activity I experienced this year was probably, episode 705, which is the episode Chip is talking about. But the biggest, what the actual moment was probably the North Providence Library. because Amy and I, there was a lot of information to unravel in that location, and we were going down one path, and that path was a very tricky path because it involved the mayor. And we had to be very careful because he was very well liked, but we didn't understand why we were getting some of the answers that we were getting. And then when it clicked of who we were talking to, whether could be the mayor, but if it could be somebody else, but when it clicked, when we finally realized it, we were like, holy crap, like, oh my God, this is mind blowing. And I think, that's a big WTF moment, because you know how much we love our history and digging into the history and getting it right and matching that with like evidence. And when this happens, it's almost like the best like paranormal soup you could possibly eat. I don't know. It's so good.
And that's what's really funny about this whole thing is that lots of times, because of COVID and some of my life circumstances, I've had to do some things remotely, and I've been fortunate enough to do a few episodes on location with Amy and Adam and the crew this season. But lots of times, even if I am on location or I'm sitting at home, what happens when I'm not there? I find out a lot of times when I watch the episode, because it's everybody's life gets busy and you don't have time to fill things in. So I'm real curious about specifically the library episode, about what happened in that episode and why Amy, I feel like I'm as invested in this as the viewer is, and I kind of like being in that position.
There's also
the sad thing is we were there, and half the time we forget until we see the episode.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right.
If you ever,
they do kind of blend all together, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
There's in that episode, there's also possibly like maybe a Zoltar, but like not a Zoltar.
No, it does look like a Zoltar.
It's definitely not a Zoltar, but it looks like a Zoltar. We were like,
that's the weirdest thing. I can't
Chip,
wait.
you saw it. Remember, it was behind glass, and you were like, that's creepy.
It is the weirdest thing. Who would want something like? Anyways, you gotta watch.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So I've got a question for you. Now that you brought up this episode, I'm going to ask from a viewer standpoint here, from almost like I came in and did some stuff on that episode, but you mentioned the mayor. Was he a bad guy or wasn't he not a bad guy?
I can't tell you.
Oh, shoot.
Which episode is this? This is episode 5, was it? Or
I think it's
8?
episode
It's the
5.
library.
All right,
no, episode 6.
I'll tell you some behind the scenes. That was almost Charlotte's Kindred Spirits debut.
I
She
remember.
investigated on the show with us because there is like supposedly some haunting going on in the children's library, but everything else was so incredible that they didn't use her little part. They're gonna do like a social media part for her. She's a little sad, but yeah, it was like the first time that we got to bring Charlotte out. She had her own little ghost hunting kit, and she came out and like
I
it was
remember
pretty cool.
seeing pictures of that.
I know it was awesome, but
One of you needs to text me and tell me whether the mayor was a bad guy or a good guy.
You know what? We
Inquiring
could.
minds want to know. Are you
Listen,
going to make me wait?
We totally could, but I don't know. I mean, I think you waiting just like everyone.
Yeah.
I'm gonna text him right now.
Oh, just text.
This is-
Text him.
I just love you,
Wait,
Amy Bruni.
hold on.
Adam, not
Text
so much.
him.
Chip and I were
Text him.
talking until about 15 seconds before this broadcast. We were like, "Oh, we gotta go." So
Listen, text him, but Chip, you read it, but don't say
show
what
any
it
emotion.
says.
Don't share. Yeah.
Oh.
As you're texting him, Amy, I will say that it's interesting watching these episodes because it allows me to fill in the gaps following each of you in between like events that we're doing. It's like, oh yeah, that's when they were going coming from that event to go to that event.
Yes.
And the Sault Ste. Marie one in particular, you guys rolled out of that and went straight to Michigan Paracon.
Yeah.
So I'm very curious to see that one. I heard some good things about
that.
Yeah, a lot of time.
We actually we investigated that with a bunch of people like the night after we left too.
Yeah.
And we were like, well, we have to keep in mind what happened on the episode, because we can't pretend like we didn't find out what we found out,
Yeah. 2 final questions, I guess, for you guys. First one is a little bit more poignant, but if the final episode of the season airs March 24th, the Country Club Murders, So if season 7, if the March 24th, episode 10 of Kindred Spirits, if that was your final bow in the paranormal,
don't say that.
and I know I'm not, but what I'm saying is, if you were to walk away from the paranormal from there, how would you like to be, I guess, remembered as far as your contributions and maybe even influencing people's understanding or theories about the paranormal? Chip.
I would walk away. I wouldn't walk away. You'd said walk away from the paranormal. I wouldn't walk away from the paranormal. If I walked away from this show, I would walk away with my head held high and a sense of immense pride. Don't Oprah me here, Aaron. With an immense sense of pride that I got to work with two people that I love and respect, and that the work that we had done together, it made a difference. It made a real positive difference. I can't think of a single case in 7 seasons that there's not been a difference made. Mm-hmm. And that's not always the case. But it is with this 3 right here. There's a difference that's been made. And, it makes me sad to think about an end. But I would feel, if it did end, I would still feel whole from the standpoint that I got to do what I got to do with 2 people that mean the world to me.
Mm-hmm.
Love you.
I love you all.
And Adam, now you have to say something nice too.
Oh God. Well, first off, everyone who's watching and us, knock on wood, because that's not going to happen.
No, I don't think so.
It's not a question about.
I know.
It's a hypothetical
question.
Yes.
I know, but I'm knocking on the wood.
Intentionally. This is like a journalist thing, to intentionally elicit emotion out of each of you and make you reflect.
You're a bitch, Aaron, for doing that to me.
I know.
I am. Okay, so I think
why I'm good at my job, Chip.
I think there's 2 things. One, I would be proud at where we have come as, like, based on what we do for the paranormal, right? Look at what we are bringing to the table. Look what we've brought to the table, and hopefully, people will take that and build upon that, rather than revert back to old ways of doing. I think the idea that we are, Amy will say this too and agree, like the humanization of spirits, like ghosts can be scary when you don't understand it, but the humanization of who we're talking to, and the realization that they were just like us, they are still just like us, they're just in a different form, and how we react to that and treat them, I think, is the biggest thing that we have done so far. But obviously we have more to do, so we'll be doing that.
Yes. No, and I think I like this question for that reason, because the reality is we're always trying to further the way we do things, and I think it's important just in life in general to always look at, live your days as though they're your last. Do your things as though you won't be doing them tomorrow. And so that's important. And so I think it's an important question. But that being said, for me, I think when we started this show 7, 8 years, I don't even know, a long time ago, 8 years ago, I remember Adam and I having to really fight for certain things, and nicely, everyone's been lovely to work with, but, we had to argue the point that we wanted to investigate with compassion. And many times we got pushback, and people are like, it's not scary enough. You need to be scarier. It needs to be something bad. It needs to be something harmful, and over time, as we stuck to our guns and kept proving time and time again that we can make a spooky ghost show, but also be compassionate and respectful. And I think you can see that now, because now shows are emulating our, not necessarily formula, but the way that we investigate a lot more than would have happened before. And I don't mind that one bit. I think that's a great thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's just kind of one of the fact that we were able to make that kind of a difference in paranormal television alone is huge. Because whether we like it or not, sometimes paranormal television is the only bit of paranormal anyone will experience. There's certain people like, this is it. But we're face to face with people all the time who do this for a living or who are very passionate about it. But there's a lot of very casual paranormal enthusiasts out there. And I think it's important for them to know that, yes, it can be spooky, it can be scary, it can be entertaining. But as Adam said, like coming at it from a human perspective makes it a whole different ballgame. So.
All right. And the final question I have for you, that was the insightful, poignant one. Now it's a silly question. Obviously, you guys have had the opportunity to appear on other shows, Dinner Impossible, things like that. And I'm curious if you were going to do a guest spot on a show, in a movie, franchise, what is it? This is now the moment. Chip.
Oh my God. What?
You need to prepare us for these questions.
I got it, though.
That one you need to really prepare us for.
Oh, I know which one I'm going to do.
Me too.
You better do the same one as me. Sorry.
I don't know what you two. I don't know what you two are thinking about. I don't read minds.
Is it a reality show, or do we just get to be like a character in the show?
Okay, let's see. You could be a character in the show, or you could appear either or. Okay. Chip, what franchise, what show would you guess?
Me answer first now. The old fart has to really rack his brain to figure this one out. Mine is so not a paranormal show. It's not. Mine is not a reality show. Mine is actually a scripted television series, and I'm kind of addicted to it because I like procedural dramas. I would either like to be a fly on the wall or a guest appearance or something on Chicago Fire.
Ooh, okay.
That would be fun.
Or Law and Order SVU.
I know you love
Law and Order.
Mr. Mariska. I love
But
me
wait,
some
I can see Chip on Chicago Fire, and he's like, "Y'all, there's a fire.
I smell smoke, y'all.
Y'all, there's a fire."
All right. Great.
I'm interested in what Ms. Bruni and Mr. Berry will say about this.
If we see the same one, I'll kill you.
I'm going to let Amy go first on this one because Adam is a little too excited to answer.
Okay, fine.
Well, it's only because I've been watching it nonstop, but I would definitely need to be a character in White Lotus. Is that what you're? Because I just want to go to fabulous places and dress fabulously and day drink and hang out with like shishi people and have just a little bit of mystery, not enough to end up like dead, but enough to like wonder what's going on. I honestly like identified with Jennifer Coolidge a little too much. I was like,
yeah.
It was like
scary.
Yes. So anyways, that would be, I mean, I'm like, where's season 3 going to be? Like what fabulous 4 seasons are they going to next?
Yeah.
Like,
right.
So if anyone's a fan, just know I'm here. I can be next.
Write it in. I mean, it is technically all in the family now. So in the Warner Brothers world, right? So you can make this happen. Adam, what's your response? Is it White Lotus?
Well, I didn't think of what I mean. Of course, White Lotus, but like, this is hard. This is a hard question. So I mean, I'd love to be in anything Ryan Murphy's doing. Just put me in anything. But to get specific. And I've tweeted them, and they have liked my tweets, and they have recognized that we exist.
I know what you're going to say.
Ghosts on CBS.
Mm-hmm.
I think Amy and I should do a guest spot. And the whole scenario is there's a paranormal reality TV show coming to the bed and breakfast. Because they're like, well, we have ghosts. Let's get this paranormal TV show in here.
Just leave me out of this. Wait a minute.
Hold on. Hold on. This is about.
You're hanging out with Mariska Hargitay.
Yeah, so. you're on Law and Order. So
I'll bring her along.
The whole idea is they get this paranormal team to come film a reality TV show there, and to get them publicity, so people will go to the thing. So half of the ghosts are like, we're going to be on TV. And the other half are like, no, it's going to bring more people here. We want to scare them out. And so the whole episode is them filming this reality paranormal show on CBS Ghost. And they liked it. I tweeted the whole thing. They liked it.
That's, you know what? They're going to air an episode like that with 2 actors playing 2
I know!
things and like
Screenshot that shit, and I'm sending it right to our manager. I'm gonna be like, get my coin. Get
so
my
you
money.
like, so I've had them on this show, the cast, and I've interviewed them a couple times, and I could give you a spoiler about something that's happening in a February episode. That's not exactly the same thing, but it's kind of close.
They stole it.
And well, that's not how you get on the show, by accusing them of stealing.
That's true.
Obviously,
paranormal reality TV.
I'm joking.
I think there's still a shot though, because they do love, all the cast loves the paranormal, and they've had weird stuff on set. So, so I mean,
the only problem though is CBS. That's the only problem.
We can all
you can make it happen.
We can make it happen. I know that the network's listening right now, and they can make some calls.
Yeah. A little cross promotion. It's okay, but
that's what I'm saying.
It is.
Well, did you
CBS...
wait? Did you see? Hold on. Did you see the cover of that? There was a cover that I posted, and it literally said it was about the show Ghosts, but it said best new show on television, and it didn't say Ghost. It said literally Kindred Spirits.
Yeah,
because they were saying that they were Kindred Spirits. Oh, and and it said best show on TV, Kindred Spirits. I was like, yes, please, yes.
It was a magazine article or cover, I think. Yeah, I did see that. It's maybe it's a serendipity, or it's meant to happen.
I hope so.
But as good as
it's portending well.
Portending well. As much as I love the show CBS Ghosts, your guys' show is Kindred Spirits.
Yeah.
Why'd you ask that, Aaron?
I feel like we should wrap up by promoting your show.
That's a really great idea.
Yeah, right?
You're so smart.
Adam took it in another direction, talking about another show. But okay, the show is Kindred Spirits. It's coming back on January 20th on Travel Channel, same day on Discovery Plus. 10 new episodes, 7th season. And my guests today are Amy Bruni, Adam Berry, and Chip Coffey. And guys, thank you so much for joining. And for everyone that's out there, thank you for joining. And remember to subscribe. And until next time, be kind, stay spooky, and keep it weird.